Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to The Garden Life. Stuart and I are up very early. It's not even 7:15, I don't think. You can hear, let's be quiet for a moment. We're up with the crickets, literally, because yesterday it got up to 100, and I think today it's supposed to get up close to 100. And if you're not out here early, well, then you ain't going to be out here much at all because it's simply too hot. Well, today I want to talk about a kind of a contentious topic, but something if you have followed me for any length of time, and the overarching theme of this video is going to be the rule I never follow, or the rule I always break, the gardening rule I always break. And I'm going to explain my rationale, and as we go through, tell me if you agree. So what do you say?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Well, before we get started with my first reason that I overplant, I want to invite you guys to, of course, as always, subscribe, follow, more importantly, share with other people that might want to be part of this circle. But if you would just go and pre-order my book. There, I'm just going to ask. We put up something yesterday about the fact that I finally got a hard copy of it. I'm really excited about it. I think it's a sweet little book. I think it would make a great Christmas gift, and it will be available in October. So there's my shout out for garden inspired living season by season, and I think you might enjoy it. So there's my plug for myself, my first commercial. Okay, so one of the reasons that I have talked about is that overplanting helps with weed suppression. So many of you ask me, Linda, how do you handle all of your weeds? Well, number one, I say that I never pass by a weed. I will always, if I see one and if it's humanly possible, I will always go ahead and dig it out. But the second reason I don't is because I am so densely planted, and for very obvious reasons, that means weed suppression. So I've got a weed down in here underneath this rose, and I am not going to pass it by, and I'm going to get it. Actually, I've got 3 weeds. Yeah, but I don't have a ton of weeds. So as soon as I see them, particularly right after it rains or after I have sprinkled, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull them. But because it's so densely planted, literally there is just not enough real estate for them to take hold and for them to go to seed because it's so densely planted. It's like living mulch. I've mentioned that over and over again. Now, my first question of the day is, since I put down some of my own homemade compost here, I now have tomatoes growing up through this rose. You see, I've got one there and I've got one here. And actually they have little flowers on them, though nothing is really producing fruit right now because it's just simply too hot. But here's my first question of the day. These are kind of a weed, but they are so kind of fun and they kind of blend in with the background. So should they stay or should they go?
Did you just call a tomato a weed?
Well, yeah. But you tell me, should they stay or should they go? Again, I'm not real optimistic that they would ever provide much fruit, and it's kind of too late in the season to transplant them someplace, but let me know your thoughts. So when we come back, I want to talk about, in addition to weed suppression, I want to talk about my next reason for why I always break this rule. Now make sure to stay till the end, because that Gardening in the Forgotten Places episode where I installed a new potting area in the back on the west side has really resonated with all of you. I think because we all have those kind of impractical places that are unattractive, and we want to do what we can to make them attractive and serviceable. And I want to address a lot of the comments and some questions that you had, but we'll reserve that for the end But again, thank you so much for your input. It is so, so valuable, not only for me, but for everyone else who reads the comments and can kind of garner some ideas from your ideas. So make sure to stay till the end because I've got a few epilogue notes, if you will. And lest you doubt that truly this reason to overplant does work, look on the other side of my holly hedge, because look what I discovered to my horror, because I'm never over here, and that is all of these weeds that are over here. And because they're not within my vision, I didn't realize they were over here. I will go ahead and address them. But you'll also notice that this area right here, other than the hollies, doesn't have anything planted in it. And because of that, I've got all of these weeds growing up. More, ooh, that one was very satisfying, than if this area was intentional and overplanted. So I'm going to clean all this up because I don't want to have these here, especially on my neighbor's side, but also because I don't want these to go to seed and take hold. So if some of you are wondering if I ever weed or how I control them, basically, these are two different ways. I overplant, so it's living mulch, and when I do see them in the cool of an Oklahoma morning, I try to pull them out immediately. So I'll get these. Again, these should have been pulled out earlier when they were smaller, but I never noticed because they were hidden from view. Okay, so this is proof that I indeed actually do a good bit of my own yard work. And Stuart is sitting here saying, Linda, I came over to shoot. I did not come over to watch you weed. But since I got over here, I couldn't resist. And now you can see in very short order, what was that? Not even 5 minutes? Not even 5 minutes. I've got this weeded, and now all I have to do is stay on top of it. I don't have to weed this whole area. So a little bit of raking. I'll get out my basket and I will relegate all of this to the trash bin. Sadly, not to my compost pile because it's got seed heads on it. It is addictive, my friends, is it not? Okay, so now moving on. Okay, let's appreciate how pretty this looks from the back side. And yes, this area is overplanted, but that's okay by me because I think it looks beautiful, it's full, and there is not a square inch for, yeah, oh, isn't that gorgeous? I have to admit, that is awfully pretty. There is not a square inch for any weeds to take hold. Now, something else that I want to point out, or I know you'll ask about, is some of you, when I show the redbud trees, you'll say, Linda, does it bother you that it's got these drying seed heads on it? And yes, actually it does bother me, and I wish this time of year they weren't there. Okay, let's look at all the cyclists. There's always something going on in the hood. I mean, well, this is going to go on for quite a while. We won't show you the whole parade, but there's a large group that comes by. We got some laggards back there. But I did want to show you what it looks like from this side because I think this is an example of overplanting. And yes, it does bother me that I've got all these seed heads on the redbuds. At the beginning of the season, no, it doesn't bother me because I think they're beautiful and they turn this beautiful color. And this time of year, they just look kind of dead. But that's the way it goes. To have those beautiful flowers, you're going to ultimately get these seed heads. And so I just choose to kind of reframe it that it's starting to look more seasonal, more late summer and early fall. But let's close on this and then we'll start up again on the other side. But this is one of my favorite views right here. And this is the view that my neighbor gets when she enters her back door. And I think this is awfully nice. Okay, before we get off the topic of my redbuds, they are eastern redbuds. They are native to Oklahoma. I like them better than the more hybridized Oklahoma versions and some other ones, but they have already grown quite a bit, and pretty soon I will achieve what I ultimately achieved at the old house. And Stuart, right here, if we can, let's put a picture of that redbud canopy that went underneath the back, or that hung over the back deck. And pretty soon this will close, and then ultimately it will close on that side too, and that will give a lot more protection to all of these hydrangeas, because you'll notice over here that these white weddings that are in more shade are a lot happier than these over here that are in full sun.
Pretty obvious.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. They're just getting a lot more south sun. Now, can they grow, and were they happy until the temps reached 100? Yes, but pretty soon I will have all of these creating kind of this overhead canopy. And you say, well, then will they get enough light? Yes, they will, because I will sculpt them and prune them. So what they will ultimately have is high dappled shade, which is, I think, the best kind of light that you can have in Oklahoma. But I digress. So back to my rationale for overplanting and my reason number 2. Now, let me just also say that I think it's prettier coming from her direction than it is coming from my direction, even though that is still rather comely. It's rather attractive. Now, when I started this cottage garden on the hill, and Stuart, if we can, let's put in some before and after pictures. I was starting a new garden. I hadn't started a new garden in gosh, 35 years, because I lived at that other home for such a long time. I also had a different exposure. And even though my other house faced south, and this one faces south as well, this one is not and was not in any kind of shade. So that's a completely different environment than I had at the other house. So obviously, I tried to create a plant list based on this exposure, things that could tolerate full sun and would even thrive in full sun. But still, Oklahoma gardening, and maybe where you garden too, and in the comments below, tell me where you garden, is always, forgive my expression, but a crapshoot. It's always kind of a 50-50 deal whether or not something is going to take. And so when you overplant, it gives you the luxury of trial and error. So when you see here this drone image that I've got right here, it doesn't look like it's really overgrown and overplanted in this image. Of course, it's not taking into account that those things would grow. The thing is, not all of those things would grow and did grow. Fortunately, I didn't have a lot of plant loss, but I did have a good amount of it. And this, I guess, then kind of encapsulates my second reason, and then it's trial and error, and it's survival of the fittest. When you overplant, it lets you know what really wants to grow there. Things that don't want to grow there obviously won't look as good, and you can relocate them or gift them or just remove them to another area. So it's a survival of the fittest kind of thing, even though you carefully selected what you wanted for the exposure in which you were going to plant. And in my case, that was full sun, high heat, and high temps. Now, let me give you an example of that. So if you have followed along with the evolution of the cottage garden, then you know that originally on these 2 berms here, I planted some apple blossom roses, which ostensibly should have done fine in this location. But for one reason or another, either because they weren't getting enough water, or they were just getting scorched, or the fact that they were on an angle, I had them planted in here. maybe yes, overplanted. But ultimately, I realized that they were not happy here. So I could then move them. Because I had overplanted this area with some boxwood and some other things, when I moved them, this area then didn't look completely barren. I already had some things in here getting established. So what I did was I relocated those to the east side, where they have proven to be a lot happier. Now, they were really blooming beautifully all along autumn's edge here and beginning to cascade over the side, and it was really beautiful. In the front, they just didn't work. But again, because I overplanted that area, when I then relocated them over to this side, which albeit is also overplanted or was overplanted, it didn't leave a big hole. So it's it helps you do this trial and error testing thing, especially important, I think, in a new garden, so that if something doesn't work, there's something else there that will take its place. Okay, now obviously, the number one, and my number 3 reason, but the number 1 priority for me when I moved in is I wanted immediate visual impact. I immediately wanted it to look full and speak the language of the cottage and of a cottage garden. Now, it's important for me to say that I completely understand that sometimes budgetary restrictions, energy restrictions, watering restrictions, all sorts of things may not make this possible for you. And certainly it wasn't my approach when I planted the garden at my other home. But at my other home, I was 35 to 40 years younger when I started that garden, and I had a long period of time in my future in which it would mature. That ain't the case now. And since I have a limited time on this planet, I wanted to make sure that I immediately got the effect that I wanted, not only for myself and my own satisfaction, but because this is my business after all. So it's not unlike if you go to a home and garden show and they've got something set up and immediately it looks lush and full. This is my bread and butter. This is my passion. This is what I do. And I also work for companies that, yes, do provide me plants. So I have that luxury. And so for me, it was important that they also got their money's worth out of me so that I could create instant beauty and really show off their plants. Do I understand it's not possible for everyone? Yes, I do. But even if you have to start with smaller specimens and not as many, you can still get that overplanted look, which I did the first year I was here, by seeding or planting large numbers of annuals that are not expensive. You can start them from seed and it will fill in the gaps. And in some of those, in the first year, you'll notice that when all of these other foundation plantings were not so large, there were tons of cleome, celosia, verbena bonariensis, all sorts of things that were growing here that took up space that is now consumed by the more mature plantings. So when you want instant effect, then you overplant. It's also pretty much, well, it's obviously a lot easier to do if you're just starting a garden bed and not an entire landscape. It makes it a lot more feasible to be able to overplant. Now, you're going to say, but Linda, aren't things like water consumption and good air circulation all issues? And yes, they are, but you're just mindful of those. And so what I have found that actually in terms of water, yes, there might be competition for water, but I also know that a lot of that moisture is not transpiring and is not evaporating away because the living mulch is holding it in place. So I think it's kind of a trade. By having it densely planted, there's not as much moisture loss, even though they are all drinking drinking from the same hose. Okay, now for this next topic, I want to come into the backyard and address what I just kind of alluded to earlier, and that's overplanting for plant loss. In the front, it didn't have, interestingly, a large amount of plant loss. Everything thrived pretty well, partly because we really greatly amended the soil. It was front and center, everything got enough light. There wasn't any kind of major tree competition, but that was not the case in the backyard. In the backyard, I did lose a number of different things. And here's an example of some of the things, for instance, that just didn't seem to do well. So this is a pancake arbor vitae, nothing intrinsically wrong with the plant, but a lot of plants really struggled here in this very thin, compacted, cedar tree competitive soil to get a hold. So back here, I did overplant with different things. I overplanted with some perennials. I really didn't overplant too much with my boxwood, but there were some things that I had planted back here that just didn't work. Fortunately, I had overplanted these boxwood because then when I pulled out some of those other things, they were able to really hold their own and make the space not look barren. And here's another example of that. You may recall that last year I just had tons of ajuga because I planted it pretty much everywhere. Indeed, I overplanted it. But I'm so glad I did because probably I lost about 50% of it. And last year the effect was it was really getting to be a little too much. But I knew that ajuga sometimes goes south, and what remains is just the perfect amount. In fact, maybe even a little bit more than I'd like, but that gives me the ability to steal from Peter to pay Paul and move it to different locations. So even though a lot of it didn't survive, I'm so glad I overplanted it, so that what remains is just the right amount, and I do have enough that I can then kind of harvest from later, and it served my purpose. The other thing is I overplanted the boxwood, but then I overplanted the boxwood on top of that because that also indicated to me that I really liked the way they looked, how this was evolving, and that some of those other more temperamental things didn't really need to be here in the first place. I really liked the structure of the boxwood more. Okay, and here is a bonus reason that I have discovered through experience over the years as to why I always break the rule about overplanting. And here is a perfect example of that. As you know, I am starting a new garden on the east side. So Stuart, right here, let's put in some footage of the new garden that is going to be on the east side, and that's going to wrap around on the north side to help camouflage my trash cans and just make that corner, even though it's a forgotten place, make it more attractive and give me more room to play, more gardening space, because this is such a small garden after all. Well, come up here and I'm going to show you. This is a perfect example of one of the things on my garden manifesto, or that I say over and over again, and that is, and you guys give me so many examples in your own garden now, I love it, stealing from Peter to pay Paul. And if I am going to steal something, whether it's jewels or a plant, I want to make sure it's something very highly valuable to steal. And by that I mean, and this is a perfect example of that, this sunshine ligustrum. When I transplant that this fall, and I will not do it until temperatures cool and conditions are a lot more amiable to transplanting, when I transplant that into my new garden, I don't know if you can see it from here, but I will have an immediately mature, some would argue overly mature specimen for that space. So that will not only remove congestion in here, which I want to do, but it will also give immediate maturity and an established look to that new garden bed. So once I remove this, I might even remove a couple of others that parenthetically were planted at exactly the same time. So that's an example of yes, that's an example of not knowing why something is happy in one place versus another and never knowing what is going to happen. But now I can remove this because, as I showed you in a previous video, behind it is an extremely large boxwood that was relocated from my other house to here and gave this garden instant visual maturity and instant visual impact because I had overplanted at the other house and the other house didn't even miss it when I moved it. But it was a statement plant here. So here's something else. In addition to the fact that both of these were planted at the same time, let me show you something else. Others that were planted at the same time and just how differently things perform. I've got 3 here that were planted at the same time, and I've just kept them gently clipped, and I don't have to move them at all. And they're one of my favorite things in the landscape in the evening when I walk down from the corner because the sun hits these like golden globes, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So these can remain, but the other one will move, and yet they were all planted at the same time. If I relocate that large one,
check out this truck, Linda.
oh, it's. I think it might be Vintage Truck Day at one of the places in the neighborhood. How cute! I really feel like I live in an old neighborhood now. That was kind of a flashback to the past. Hang with me here.
We're moving.
So this one then will go in the middle of that flower bed. We almost got dive bombed by a monarch. This will go in the middle of the flower bed, and these other already established sunshine ligustrum can go on either side of it. So I not only have maturity from these, but I have balanced maturity from the other 2. That will enable me to re-examine this space. I promise you this space will not miss them, but it'll give me a little bit more area for some perennials that I want to plant to get a little bit more color in here from White Flower Farm. And I'm going to be sharing that list with you in the coming week. So I'll have more room for some other perennials that will give me a little bit more diversity in the front yard. So that's another reason I can get instant maturity by transplanting evergreens, deciduous shrubs, blooming shrubs. I can get instant maturity in another location because I wisely overplanted in one location at the very beginning. So this is what I mean. And by the way, Stuart's been very, very patient today because about every 5 minutes I have to stop and cough or blow my nose or something. So he's as always, very patient. So imagine this area now. And if I started out and I put in a 1 to 3 gallon sunshine ligustrum in the middle of this flower bed, okay, it would take up about this much space. That other one, by the time I measure it, its expanse will be considerably larger. And you can see here, I can kind of tell, I can take the exact measurements. And then in the dust on this black tarp, I know what its footprint will be. So this footprint is considerably more impressive than this footprint. And then I will have 2 more over here.
It's nice.
Yeah, it's kind of a nice little perk. So there's the other one. and there's this one. Now, the reason this is handy is I can then design on my tarp. So this one is Sunshine Ligustrum, and I can put that there. I could also do this with chalk or something else. And this helps me because I am just a fake garden designer. I'm not a real garden designer. I'm not a trained garden designer. This helps me visualize then what I want to have around those and the scale of what I want to make this look pretty mature, whether I transplant it or not. So even if everything else that I put into this garden bed is smaller, it's nevertheless going to reach maturity and instant impact almost immediately because I have introduced these mature specimens. Does that make sense?
It does.
It does make sense. Okay. So so I might steal some more things from Peter to pay Paul over here to also give instant maturity. So I've already got my eyes on some Gara that I want to put in here that I think would be more effective over here than it is in the front, and a number of other things. And I will share that whole list with you probably in the next Wednesday walkabout, because I'm going to start identifying with flags what things I want to be removed. Because fairly soon, once we're fairly certain that this grass is killed out, then we'll start doing some garden prep work here. Way too early to do any planting. It's still too hot. But nevertheless, we can come in here and start amending this soil and getting things prepped so that as soon as the temperatures mitigate, we'll be able to come back in here and start some planting. So a few final thoughts and your follower comments when we come back. Okay, a little housekeeping here. So many of you asked about links that I put in the last video, and sometimes we'll put the video up and then I go in after and I put the links in the description. So if you don't see them immediately, just check back a few minutes later and those links will be in. The other thing is, if you're not sure how to find those links in the description box, then Stuart, would you just do a little tutorial here or something that shows people? I think we've got one, because I know it's not necessarily easy to find. It's not easy to find, but all of the links are there. And of course, I am trying to be better about reading the comments. And if you ask me for a specific link, I will try to get it to you. No promises, but I will try to get it to you. We're a small operation here. So I'll try to get that to you. The other thing is, I'm going to try to be better about doing outfit of the day. A lot of you request it, and I'm just not always good about it, partly because I just think what I've got on ain't such a much. But I'll still try to be good about it, because I do know it's frustrating to see like a cute t-shirt like this one that I bought online and then not be able to find it. So I will try to put a link to this cute t-shirt, which is one that my sister told me. Actually, I think she sent me this one, that I absolutely had to have. My breeches with all of these extra pockets for my Kleenex and such. I got at Target a number of years ago. My boots, love my boots. These are high C, kind of Chelsea or mud boots. I don't know that I have that much more on. What earrings do I have on? Oh gosh, I got these earrings years and years and years ago, I think at, I don't know, a flea market or something. Yeah, flea market or something. I thought it was a daisy.
What's a daisy with?
Daisy with a piece. Okay, well there you go. And my hand brace, which yes is ever present these days. I bought off of Amazon, I think. So there you go. There is my outfit du jour for those of you that want to know. And oops, my garden gloves are from Cool Jobs. Love these, and I'm wearing these more and more because they protect my forearms. So that's kind of a summation of all of my rationales for overplanting your garden. If you can do it, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, and it's worked out pretty successfully for me. Okay, And here, in answer to one of your viewer questions, this is my friend Lori, who lives on the other side of the fence over which my red umbrella is hanging a little bit.
Yes.
And
It is.
And is it just bothering the
You know what?
heck
Here's the
out
funny
of
thing.
you?
No, the dog the first day was really curious. And my husband kept saying, why is the dog out there barking at something red? And then we realized it was a red umbrella.
yeah.
And I said, well, I bet Linda's got something going on. So,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
It's
But
these things it's give and take. That's what neighbors are all about. Give
and
take.
especially in these
But I know where to find her.
Yeah, and especially
if
in
I
these
need a dam.
especially in these neighborhoods. That is that's just the nature of living in an old
Absolutely.
neighborhood and in very, very close quarters. So, but actually, when I looked at it, it actually looks kind of cute coming if you look through your wrought iron gate and that little bit of
And
red.
a little bit of red. It's
and,
beautiful.
And it really kind
It's
of
an added feature.
Yes, it's an added feature.
I actually figured if she was trying to block any view of my ugly backyard from her beautiful photos. That's what I really thought.
I love you.
I likewise.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, you all, I loved all of your comments, mostly because they were so helpful to me and they gave me so many great ideas. So I want to address a couple of them, and if we can, we'll try to put them up on the screen. But number one, we just addressed the issue about the red umbrella hanging over the fence, and I think Lori addressed it pretty well. But I think the point is well taken by the viewer who asked about it. Linda, would it bother you if it was hanging over your fence? Well, one thing, it's like, no, again, this is good garden fit. Know where you garden and know how you garden and know with whom your garden, with whom it might affect, with who it might affect. So I think Lori addressed that pretty well. But the point is well taken that you do want to be, you do want to be considerate about that. Now, Lori and I talk almost daily. So if anything was bothering her, we are good friends, so she could just tell me, Linda, that's driving me crazy. The other thing is, this isn't a permanent fixture. This is something that I can easily take down. And so, but if it was a neighbor with whom I wasn't very friendly, if it were a curmudgeon that lived next door, or if I really felt like they had an extremely developed garden and this would really mess with their aesthetic, then definitely I would take that into consideration. But I love Lori and her yard looks fine, but that's not what she's into. And so as she said, she is just, I think she's okay with it. But I think that's a good point, is how would you feel if somebody did it? If somebody did it to you? I think that's a really good point. And believe me, it was, and this is the other thing I love about your comments. I love how we are so civil and so supportive of one another, because if somebody comments and they are, even if they disagree with me or they think something looks awful, if it's presented in an objective, just in a civil tone, and that's great, because it can help me learn and help me look at things in different ways. And so I so appreciated the civil tone with which you guys share your recommendations. And it's typically something that synergizes the good that we've already got going on, the good ideas we've already got going on. They're not necessarily criticisms, and if they are, if they're framed correctly, then I will always listen to them. So that's number one. Okay, the most frequently suggested thing, which I loved because it means that we so have this aesthetic here on this channel, and you so get what my aesthetic is, and that is, Linda, wouldn't it look great to gravel this whole area here with pea gravel, and it would look so consonant with the back to the front. It would look that much more finished, and it would look that much more attractive. And I could not agree with you more. And if it were an option, I would probably execute it. But it's not, for a couple of different reasons. One, this was never really meant to be a pretty side of the property. Even though this brick wall is attractive, it's here because it has to do with the contours of the land. This passage here isn't technically a passage. It is just drainage, as I said earlier, and it just enables drainage to flow from one place to another. So in a very, very heavy rain, especially because my type of roof doesn't have guttering, in a very, very heavy rain, when that water gushes down off of the eave, then it would also wash away all of this gravel. The other reason is this is my foot sure entry and passageway from the front to the back. So yeah, this is concrete. So there's no gravel to slip on. There's no gravel to get stuck in your boots. There's no gravel if you want to wear high heels. And most importantly, for my garden tour coming up, if you are elderly, if you're on a walker or anything like that, then it's a lot easier to navigate this space if I don't add any additional gravel to it. But do I love the idea? Yes. Now, could I also maybe put down some gravel and there's some kind of adhesive that you could make it secure to the ground? Yes. But that's not a risk I want to take, and it's also not an expense I want to absorb. Remember, this is a forgotten place that I am trying to make practical. And so in my eagerness to make it attractive, I don't want to damage the practicality of it. I don't want to sacrifice the practicality of it just because I tend to be kind of fastidious in that regard. The other thing is be on the lookout, because I did not know that there was such a thing. Be on the lookout for a half red umbrella, because I didn't even know they made such a thing as a half umbrella. And I've ordered one to try it out. It may or may not work, but I've ordered one to try it out. As I said, it's gotten really, really hot. So other than watering, I'm not out here a whole lot, but I will be shortly. Okay, the last comment that I want to talk about is, Linda, why didn't you place this over here so it would be right next to your potting bench? And logically that would make sense, but here's a couple of reasons I didn't do it. Number one is just common sense, and I think it was when we put this in here, we had to find a place where the legs on this trash can holder that Stuart so kindly gifted me to be able to penetrate down into the earth to make it flush, because this is on a grade. And this was the spot that we chose, and happily it was right in the middle between these two posts. If I moved it over here, which I'm not even sure would be possible, it wouldn't be so centered. The other thing is, I do like this little bit of softness here, and it's not too difficult for me to just walk over here. But the other reason is more practical, and that is, if I am potting up something and I make a mess and I have a lot of extra potting soil on here, I can just whisk it into this flower bed. If I had these here and I whisked it, then it would just create kind of a mess on top of my lids. So that may seem like a silly detail. Oops, that may seem like a silly detail, but it's all of those kinds of things that when you're actually executing, you too would take into account. And right now, I'm just, like I say, just pleased as punch. A lot of you also said, Linda, get some teak oil and rehydrate this, and I will do that. But as soon as Hubs gets back, I will find out, because I'm sure he already has some teak oil someplace, and I will find that out. And this was one of your ideas to begin with, so I give you complete credit. Thank you guys so much for all of your input, for being such what I consider to be just good friends. And just continue to comment, continue to share. If you have an idea, oh, one more idea that I hadn't thought of. I just noticed that as I was looking at Stuart. A number of you said, Linda, paint this cottage gray instead of black. And yes, I will probably do that. And Stuart, right here, let's take, by the way, you can find it on the website under frequently asked questions, and that is the formula for what I call Vater Cottage Gray. It doesn't really have a name, just a formula. So Stuart, right here, let's put that formula. But the other thing was, somebody said, well, why don't you just plant around it? Well, I can't because that's concrete, but I can plant over here. And because of the growth habit of a juca and how it spreads, if I plant some here and keep it watered, pretty soon it's probably going to crawl over this and soften this whole edge. So thank you for that idea. That was great. Lastly, this was one thing that I wanted to point out to you, is I have very, very long hoses. And you may recall that I told you how I bought a new one of my favorite hoses in a longer variety because I need it to go longer. What I discovered was that when I use hose racks like this or a hose pot, a larger hose is hard to fit in there. But also, even though this hose is great, if I've coiled it up enough, it can knot on itself, and it also kinks. So what I have discovered is that I use now this path basically as a running pad for my hose, and then I just kick it to the side. You can see here, I just kick it to the side so I don't trip on it. And I'll show you what I mean. So this right here actually is hooked up to the faucet in the front. That way it's not kinked, it pulls out completely straight, and I've got water where I need it. Conversely, the other hose that's hooked up in the back runs this way. And yes, I know some of you will say, Linda, don't walk on that. And this is how, rather than coiling it up and putting it in a pot, this is how I then just put it up like this. I just kick it to the side. And there's probably some kind of tracking system that I could use that would contain it along the edge, and I can look into that. But for right now, one step at a time, this works just fine. So there you go. There's always one last thing. And my last thing today is I'm going to go in and blow my nose. And thank you so much. You all have a great Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you on the next Wednesday Walkabout.